Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 114 of the CUInsight Experience. I could not be more excited to let you know about our new sponsor of the show, CUES. Not only are they the leading talent development provider to the credit union industry, but they were also one of the very first supporters of CUInsight.com 13 years ago. I will always be grateful to our friends at CUES for helping us get to where we are today. I can truly say I wouldn't have been able to have these conversations on the show if it wasn't for the relationships that I've built with people at CUES events over the years. So after listening to this episode, check out the CUES podcast on cumanagement.com. It's amazing content from thought leaders inside and outside of our community. I'm telling you, it is stuff that you just don't want to miss. All that being said, my name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and I'm lucky enough to have conversations with the amazing people who make credit unions so great. I get to bring them all to you, pick their brains, see if I can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Juan Fernández. Juan is the president and CEO of the Credit Union Association of New Mexico. Juan is someone that I've had the chance to meet over the years, so I knew this was going to be a great episode, and I've been looking forward to just having this conversation on the show for all of you. We talked about how credit unions can lead and thrive in a congested financial services space. We talked about collaboration and breaking down those barriers at credit unions and in our careers. We also talked a lot about mentorships and the people that we surround ourselves with and how they can help us along the way, and quite honestly, how they can help the credit unions that we all care so deeply about. I truly enjoyed this conversation, and the part about Juan's career journey and those leadership lessons that he learned along the way, I think you're all going to take something from. At the end, of course, we wrapped it all up with the rapid fire questions. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with Juan Fernández. Enjoy. Juan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Good afternoon, Randy. So nice to see you and be here with you.
Oh, I have been looking forward to this since we set the time. I have to start. Congratulations on recently being named the president and CEO of the Credit Union Association of New Mexico. Kind of a homecoming for you.
It is. It's great to be back in New Mexico. It's great to be leading credit unions into the future. I mean, I'm still pinching myself and so excited to be here.
I can only imagine. You know, there were a couple different directions that instantly in my mind, I guess I was like, we could go. So I'm gonna start in a couple different places. But the one is in, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this, but I still was. And that's probably my ignorance. But how does it feel to be the first Latino LP?
You know, it feels great. I mean, I got to say that it is an honor and it is a privilege. And I not only for me, but I also take it as a responsibility to make sure that there are others, because while it's really exciting and it's really humbling to have been chosen as the first Latino, it's still unfortunate that there's only been a handful. It's only been me as the first Latino, and there's only been one African American league president. And I think we need to develop the next generation of leaders. We need to get more people of color, younger people, women in our league system prepared to be in leadership in our leagues and in our credit unions. And that's going to be one of my big priorities, one of the things that I really want to do, because if I want one legacy, is I want to ensure the future of credit unions. And that includes making sure that we have a great group of people that are ready to lead into the future.
Absolutely. You know, that is always a big conversation in our house. Jill is, that is her passion as well. So I look forward and I can't wait to see what you do. And it is great to see. And again, I congratulate you on the gig. It's amazing. It's awesome. So the second question I had is, I mentioned as, you know, congratulating you that it's a homecoming of sorts. I will tell you that one of the questions that I get asked, and used to be more when I used to get to see people. And we were talking before we hit record about we can't wait to get back out there and see everybody. But one of the questions that I was asked a ton, and we have a lot, the podcast is primarily CEOs when we're talking leadership, is that idea. Some people, it's like they came up, in the credit union. They went from teller to CEO over the course of their career, and it was the same credit union the whole time. Other people have had to leave to get that CEO chair. And for you, you left an organization, you went to a natural person credit union, and then you get the CEO chair, right? You come back to a similar organization. Do you think that time away, or by making that jump over to the credit union, actually helped you get to where you are today?
Randy, I do, and maybe not for the reason that you might think.
Okay.
So the last year, as we all know, the last 18 months have been extremely challenging for everyone. It's been extremely challenging for credit unions. It's been challenging for credit union members. And I believe that it was a great experience to go to an actual credit union. So when the board of directors of the association in New Mexico was going through the hiring process, having that connection to them, knowing exactly what was keeping them up at night, in a way that I didn't before, because it had been about 15 years since I had actually worked at a natural person credit union. So having that experience and being able to connect with them and think the way that they were thinking, and thinking about the solutions that associations should be thinking about to help them into the future, I do think that helped me. I think it gave me a really different perspective. The other thing I'll tell you is that one of the things that I did at the Canopy Credit Union, where I went for 10 months, was I did some financial coaching with some members. I really wanted to see not only what the experience the credit union was having, but what was happening with members, what was happening day to day in the lives of our members, and how were credit unions serving the members through those times of crisis. So all of those things combined, I do think did make me, not only did it help my candidacy to the position, but frankly, it made me a better leader. It really gave me a much interesting perspective about the situation at large.
I mean, think of the year that you talk about members dealing with and the credit unions dealing with. I know, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but I mean, even the pure shift forward, if you want to call it a digital transformation that was born out of necessity, for you to be on the front lines during that, to now be able to bring that back to the credit unions of New Mexico, I think that has to benefit as well. Like, you're not just, reading a report and saying, this is what we should do, right? Like, you were there, doing that. So
absolutely. I mean, the best innovations, I think, come out of times of crisis, and being, having been on the ground was tremendously helpful. I mean, and to be honest with you, I'm a big believer in mentorship, and I'm a big believer in learning from leaders. And Canopy Credit Union has just a fantastic group of leaders. Charlotte Nemec is their CEO. And I frankly learned a ton from her. And one of the things I learned, to be honest with you, is, Canopy's not huge. They're about $190, $200 million in assets, but they really punch above their weight, because their mindset is always like, how can we get this done? And that mindset is critical for small credit union associations to survive, because I really believe that small credit union associations have a huge role, they can play a huge role and are playing a huge role helping credit unions. And that mindset is critical. How can a small credit union deliver, a credit union league and credit union deliver for their members?
Yeah, I know when Jill was at the Connecticut League, I was always blown away with what they were able to accomplish with, a fairly small staff, right? I respect the chair you are in. I will say honestly, before, I did not know everything you all do, and it is amazing. So you have a fan. I respect what you're doing there. So I want to ask, how do you think that experience, and you kind of touched on, it's going to help? I mean, a couple different things here. Like, how does it help leading your team? Now that, I'm sure many of the people, on your team you worked with for many years, right? So as now that you're the CEO and, you're their fearless leader, how is it going to help you from a leadership standpoint there? And then also, how does your experience, how will that help New Mexico's credit unions going forward?
Well, I've done quite a few things at associations. So I know I've done the work that the team is doing. And having been those 10 months at a credit union, I know the needs of the credit union. So what I'm working to do, my goal will be to align those things. What does the association need to do to remain relevant into the future? How can we lead and help equip credit unions with the tools they need to help them thrive? And one of the things, once again, Canopy did really well was just building a really cohesive team culture. I think that's really important. And as we know, not every organization has that.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to building and strengthening. Because when you're small, you need to be efficient. You need to work well with team members. So I'm excited to go, as you said earlier, basically a homecoming. I am working with people that I know really well, and I'm looking forward to motivate them to really reach their goals on a personal level and pair them up with mentors, but also develop new lines of businesses that are going to make sure that they feel empowered and relevant, because we're going to be doing some great things in New Mexico. New Mexico is a state that has so much opportunity and challenges, and that means that we really are going to be playing an awesome role helping credit unions leverage the credit union difference for community impact.
Absolutely. We're going to get much more into those career leadership lessons that you've learned along the way, or, a little bit later in the show. But I did want to start with a kind of that big picture question. When you talked about some of the experiences that you had the past year, if you want to say something that I've been just thinking a lot on in 2021 is we put out a lot of fires last year. We've overused the word pivot. I'm sure we're all sick of hearing it about as much as we are another Zoom call. But, the idea that to get where you are, to be the CEO, and often for leaders in the credit union space, we have to start thinking, we have to keep thinking strategically. Like, you're talking about what, your goals are for the league 12 months, 36 months, 5 years from now. We have to have that kind of vision too. Do you have any hacks to allow yourself that space or time for the listeners out there who want to start thinking forward instead of just what fire are we putting out today?
I will say that the best leaders listen. Listen more than talking. I think it's so important to engage with your membership. One of the first things I'm doing right now, I literally, one of the things that's been taking most of my time is actually I'm going and I'm meeting one by one with credit union CEOs throughout New Mexico and their teams, because I want to hear directly from them, what are they going through? Because if you don't listen, you're not going to know what's happening. You're not going to know how to solve your members' problems. And the same thing happens with the credit union. I think making sure that you're engaging and you're connecting with your membership is extremely important. The other thing I'll say is, as we look to the years ahead for individual credit unions, in my opinion, I think credit unions need to really lean in the cooperative nature of credit unions. I think there's so much power when we all come together and we collaborate. I think fintech is going to become extremely important, and everyone's talking about it, but I think credit unions have an opportunity here because banks don't really collaborate the way that we can and do. So we have a fantastic opportunity to really come together, tackle fintech, and use the cooperative model to our advantage and lead in this space. The other area that I'm hoping happens in the next year to 5 years is that credit unions do continue doing a ever better job in DEI. We need to become more diverse. And it's not just for social reasons. In my opinion, our survival depends on it. So and Randy, you and I and most of the listeners who've been in the credit union movement for a long time will know this. We've been talking for decades about how are we going to lower the average age of credit union members. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to do that is to really find our niches. And diverse communities are a huge opportunity. Many of folks in diverse communities are underserved. So I think we have a fantastic opportunity that not only is great for the social good, but it's also great business sense. And I think it's going to help us lower the average age of members, and it's going to help us become more relevant into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I generally have a follow-up question to that, but you already answered it. So I appreciate that. I like to ask the question whenever we talk about DEI. There's the social side, but I agree with you completely. It also makes a great business case, right? So I generally follow up with for the CFOs listening out there, right? I think you did that perfect. That's good stuff there. There was a question that popped into my mind earlier in your comments there, and we've seen a lot of consolidation. Obviously, you and I, have been around for a while, and that number of credit unions has at least been cut in half, right? And we've seen similar in the leagues. You mentioned earlier that the smaller leagues are very important to the system. I think we both agree, so are the smaller credit unions too, right? Is this, I don't know if the words I'm looking for is concerning, but I loved what you were saying about collaboration. One of my pet peeves, I think, over the years has always been that credit unions are so collaborative and helpful. And you and I see that at like national conferences, but sometimes to their neighbor credit union, not so much, right? Because then it's almost a competition thing. But if you're a credit union in Delaware and a credit union in California, you'll share everything with each other, right? So as an LP, how do you, is there a way to bring that collaboration, together, whether it's with league partners or whether it's with, individual credit unions in your state to maybe slow down at least the number of credit unions disappearing? And is that important? I guess, I shouldn't put my own views on this.
So Randy, I'll tell you that at least in New Mexico is critical. So in New Mexico, there are actually a great percentage of our credit unions are in rural parts where it might be only one branch. Actually half of our credit unions have 5 employees or fewer. So oftentimes, when you have a merger, that means a community will end up without a financial institution because they might close that branch. So I'm obviously, as a league president, I'm not here to tell a credit union whether or not to merge. However, what I am going to be doing is that I'm going to be building a couple of services to help smaller credit unions not only survive, but thrive. One of the biggest challenges to that is succession planning.
Yep,
I think
absolutely.
Identifying talent that we can develop and that we can empower so that they're willing, able, and ready to lead at a small credit union is critical for the survival of our movement. So that's going to be one of the biggest focuses of mine as a league president. I mean, we need to do better. We need to do this, and we need to be laser focused. And honestly, I think we need to put pressure on regulators. I would love to see to start a conversation where we put pressure on the regulators so that I'm not asking regulators to be lenient or to overlook issues, because that, after all, we all know that's one reason oftentimes credit unions shut down, because there were issues that were not identified early. But I would love to see the regulators have a constructive relationship where they identify issues and they help the credit union address them. And I think the league CUNA system has a role to play in that. And we need to be more active in that. We need to be more active in our regulatory advocacy on behalf of our credit unions. The last thing I saw is I'm pretty blessed in New Mexico. We do have a fantastic group of credit union CEOs who are very collaborative. So you will probably end up having us again in the future. I know you've met Marcia. She's been on this podcast.
Absolutely.
But we're going to be working on some collaborative programming, collaborative new products, services to drive value to both the larger credit unions and the smaller credit unions. And it's all surrounding collaboration and how can we help smaller credit unions not just survive, but thrive.
Well, I look forward to watching you do that, and I'm sure our CUInsight readers and listeners can't wait to hear about it. So you have a place to spread the word anytime you want. So, I'm a big believer in that we are shaped by those who we choose to surround ourselves with. So who does Juan surround himself with, and how have they shaped you and helped, move you along in your career?
Randy, that is such a great question. And there are so many people, there's that saying that's very common, but it's very true, that a leader doesn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, it happens, it's built by a lot of people. I like to surround myself, I would say, with two types of people. People that I admire greatly what they've accomplished, and also people that think differently about things than I do, that will challenge my perceptions. And as a Latino leader, it wasn't until I got to college that I started making sure that I also had some people that spoke my language, that looked like me, that were role models for me. Because it was really challenging when I started in high school and I was learning English, basically feeling like I had to assimilate and I had to give up who I was,
right? Yeah.
In order for me to be at the table. And then when I started in the credit union movement, I was often the only Latino, the only Spanish speaker. And I was always hired because they always needed that one person that spoke Spanish. So I was a great fit in credit unions. But it was a pretty lonely place. It was until I met people like Pablo De Filippi, Victor Coro, who became role models to me, who showed me that I didn't just have to sit at the table. I could create my table. I could be myself. I could bring myself to work. And I owe a huge debt of gratitude to them. But there's been, in the league system, there's been so many people who are just fantastic trailblazers. People like Jill in Connecticut, Diana in California, Troy Stang, the time I spent at Canopy Credit Union, my goodness, the amazing work that they're doing in the Northwest Association is just amazing. But the other thing I do, and I've always done, because prior to coming back to New Mexico, I had served for 13 years at the associations. I've really built strong relationships with credit union CEOs. And we have, as I said earlier, we have a fantastic community. People like Marcia Majors, who just have just an amazing personal story. And having those people is critical even for advice. I mean, there are always challenges that you confront with, and it's important before making a decision that you run those things by people. And it's important to develop that group, that support group that you trust, that will build you up and will also challenge your assumptions.
After people are done with listening to this episode, they should go back and listen to Marcia's, because it was a good one. So
It was wonderful.
Got to give her a shout out. One of the things, and again, you and I have been around, for a little while now. It's not tough to find purpose in credit unions, right? It's that the people helping people is everywhere. But how do you, both personally and professionally, make sure that you're staying, purpose driven? At times, I think we all can kind of sway off course a little bit, and get busy with other things. So really, it's just kind of that question of like, how do you make sure that you're still living your purpose, both individually and as a leader in our system overall?
It is so easy to get bogged down with operations, daily operations, and all you're thinking is numbers. It is so easy to do that. And I think that's actually one of the greatest challenges, in my opinion, to getting young people to see themselves as having a career, not just a job, seeing the long-term vision. So the way that I'm going to answer that question, Randy, is what I always tell young people is like, it's so important to plug in to the network, to engage with other leaders, to have regular phone calls with people that are doing amazing things, to hear what they're doing so that you are inspired, and help you take your site from just the daily operations to see the bigger picture of the great good that you're building. It's so important to credit union CEOs on the call to go out and meet with some of the members whose lives you're touching and hear their stories. Not only will that be a great pat on the back, but frankly, it's going to help you realize potentially that there may be needs that you're not meeting, that there may be great products and services that you could be innovating in. So, long answer to your question, but basically what I would say is it's just really, really important to create that network. Like, go to websites like CUInsight and read what's happening in the movement. Listen to podcasts where you can get inspired by the stories that other people are having, and really build that amazing mentorship network. And by the way, I'm a strong believer that mentorship goes both ways. I mean, you could
Absolutely.
have two fantastic leaders that are well seasoned, and they can mentor each other, because you can learn from each other, you can contribute to one another, you can challenge each other. and you can build each other up. But also those mentorship opportunities with young people, because they often see the world in a very different way. I mean, by the way, speaking of firsts, I'm the first millennial league president. So having different perspectives, in my opinion, is hugely important for decision making, but also on your personal life as you build yourself up and you get inspired into seeing the greater cost and not just the daily operations.
Absolutely. Again, I know it's a place that you and I have been very fortunate and it was one of the reasons for starting this podcast 3 years ago, was I felt so grateful for the conversations I would have nationally with different leaders in credit unions just at the conferences, like standing outside a breakout room at the Marriott Marquis Bar, wherever it happened to be, right? But these amazing conversations that often helped me while even building CUInsight, because I'd have a question. I wouldn't know what I was doing. I was, whatever happened to be. And everyone was so willing to share. And I made great friends and mentors and, a network because of that. And the podcast, the idea was like, let's share some of this. Not everybody gets to go to every conference, right? So having somebody like yourself to share your knowledge with the listeners, that to me was part of it. And then something else you said, and I've mentioned it before on the podcast, is also like that mentoring going both ways, but having that person who's not going to always just say, "You're smart, of course, that's great." A former LP, Paul Gentile, used to be a guy that I used to call in the beginning of CUInsight all the time, right? Because he had a experience as the publisher of Credit Union Times, and I would throw out ideas to him, and he didn't mince words when he thought they were dumb ones. But I needed that. So much of what you say resonates with me in so many ways.
It helps you so much avoid many mistakes too, and it helps you fine tune.
Absolutely. That is absolutely for sure. How is like your purpose, this mission that you kind of live by, going to benefit your team members, at the league, but also your member credit unions?
So I'm a DE. I've started in a credit union when I was 19 as a teller. I would say that, I really live and breathe the credit union mission, and even more so after having gone back and worked at a credit union. But even in my career earlier on, I worked at 3 different credit unions. So the strongest way that I believe this is going to help my team is by remaining focused. Many organizations often are very unfocused. They lose sight of what their North Star is, and that creates issues with the direction of the organization. It also creates issues with morale. And I'm very clear of what an association's North Star should be. I mean, and that needs to be serving our credit unions and serving our members and making sure that we break down barriers so that they're more efficient and they're able to do a better job reaching out to their communities and their members and really tapping into the opportunities that exist. And that, in my opinion, that is the biggest asset that I'm going to bring not only to my team, but to my credit unions.
I love it. I was actually just making a note because you said something amazing that I think might be the title to this podcast. So I wonder if anybody can pick it out. A big picture question for you before we kind of move on to a little more of the leadership journey is, you mentioned fintechs earlier, and I think they can be a benefit, but they can also scare us. There is a lot of disruption, though, going on, and none of us think it's probably going to slow down. And it's, from non-even traditional bank type, players in this. Is there something that you think credit unions need to do better to stay relevant in this very fast-paced, and change financial services marketplace?
In addition to, going after DEI, which is huge, and we've already talked about that, the other thing is being different. It's okay to be different. You don't have to go out and try to do things the same way that for-profit financial institutions are doing. So embracing our differences. I think we need to lead into the cooperative nature of credit unions, into the credit union difference, and communicate that. We need to tell our story. We need to tell our story not only to legislators, but frankly to the community. And when we do, we're going to be able to not just grow, but really thrive, because especially younger community members, younger folks, really are attracted to mission-driven organizations. And that's what credit unions are. It's not like I'm saying we need to change who we are. It's just we need to lean in on that and communicate that. We need to tell our story.
I couldn't agree with you more. And we're both DEs, so we'll make sure to put in the show notes a link over there for Chad and Gigi, and make sure everybody should become DEs. Come on, let's do this.
That's right.
Okay, so now I wanted to get into your career journey a little bit. You just mentioned a few minutes ago that you started in credit unions as a teller at 19. The question that I had, and I've been asking all year, is this idea that most of us didn't grow up thinking someday, hey, we want to work in credit unions. So 2 questions, actually. A young Juan, what'd you want to be when you grew up? And when was that point when you looked at credit unions and you said, this is for me. I think this can be my career, right? Like you mentioned earlier too about like people not looking at it as a job, but as a career. When was that point for you?
Oh, Randy, not to open a can of worms, but when I was a child, I wanted to be a politician. I mean, I wanted to be governor of Puerto Rico. That was actually really my dream. That was really what I wanted to do.
As you know, I'm a huge fan of Puerto Rico, so I love spending time there as much as I can. So
that's right. I've heard. So, I love politics then. I still do today. But to answer your question, I did always like banking also, but I never saw myself really having a career in banking. So when I was a freshman in high school, I had an English teacher she was amazing, and she was one of those early mentors I had. And I spent a lot of time with her because she was really helping me learn English. And her husband worked at a bank, and that's how I ended up doing an internship at a bank. And I really liked it. So from the very beginning, I really liked having that connection with at the time customers, and it was a community bank. It was not a national bank. So they did a lot of things very similar to credit unions. And then eventually I met someone who at the time was a branch manager at a smaller credit union in Rochester, New York, and he recruited me to come credit unions, and I never looked back. But even then, I always saw myself going back to politics. So
okay.
My senior year of college, I did an internship in the legislature in New York. And I met Bill Mellon. It was one of the first meetings that the then assemblyman that I was working for had, and I was part of that meeting. And I saw what the Credit Union Association was doing, and I saw, well, this is interesting. It's a fascinating way to kind of merge policy and affect change without getting into dirty politics through the credit union movement, which I loved. So at the end of that legislative session, I ended up going and getting a job for the New York Credit Union League doing community development. So I was doing community organizing and helping credit unions better understand the needs of underserved communities and develop products and services to reach them and kind of tackle those underserved communities. So that was probably the moment I realized that this was going to be a career, because I think I wanted to get into politics not because of politics. In fact, I think running for office is not a very attractive idea whatsoever. But I wanted to get into politics because I wanted to help people and affect change. And I think bringing it back to credit unions today, I think if there's one thing we need to do better as a movement when it comes to younger employees, is making sure that they see that bigger picture. Not have league services and training only for the CEOs and those in upper management. I think as leagues, we need to create more training opportunities and networking opportunities for young folks, but we need to welcome them and show them that there is a much bigger movement that is more than just deposits, withdrawals, and check cashing, that we're really touching people's lives. And that's critical. The last thing I'll say in that same vein is that probably 4 months ago, I invited a teller to join one of the happy hours that I have been doing. And I got a text message after that happy hour telling me, I'm sold. I want to be part of this movement forever. And it was because he was able to see that there is a much bigger movement that you can be part of. And that's why I really encourage people to go to CUInsight, listen to podcasts, and really make sure that you're not just focused on operations, but on the bigger picture.
If people want to be a part of your happy hours, is there a link? Can they reach out to you? What's
Sure. Yeah, the best way to be part of it is to go on LinkedIn and find me. And we're taking a small break during the summer, but we will be having more episodes in the weeks to come. But it had been weekly during the winter months. It's probably going to be about once a month or twice a month during the summer before we go back to increasing the frequency in the fall and winter again.
We will, of course, link to all the ways to get a hold of you. So hopefully it's a cool thing that you're doing there. That's for sure. Is there something that your team in New Mexico has heard you say so many times they can finish your sentence?
How can we?
How can we? I love
How
it.
can we? Thinking outside the box, not just being limited by whatever, whether it's resources, time. How can we? Are there partnerships we can forge to make it happen? Are there new ideas or new processes, new ways that we can do it? How can we get it done? The other thing, and of course it's not something that's unique to me, but it's, what gets measured gets done, and making sure that we're measuring the right things. Like a credit union can't just measure financials. You need to measure member service. You need to measure member satisfaction, all those things. So you need to make sure that when you are creating performance reviews, when you're creating your strategic vision for the organization, that you identify and measure the things that matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to measure impact too, right?
Absolutely.
So is there a myth about being a great leader that like you wish would just go away, maybe makes your skin crawl?
I think a lot of people think that we're unique or different, that there was something special about us that got us here. And yes, there's a lot of work, but the reality is that leaders make it to where they make it because they get connected to people that build them up. It's not like you get there on your own. So what I always tell young people regarding this myth is, be part of the movement. Surround yourself with people that are going to build you up, that are going to challenge you, that are going to be great mentors. And finding a right mentor for you, it may be hard. I mean, there's always someone. Not everyone is a great mentor for everyone. So finding the right fit is really important, because for me in my career, it's been built on internships, it's been built on networking, it's been built on mentors, and identifying the people that inspired me and helped me think differently.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I seem to be saying that a lot. Outside of credit unions, what does Juan do to recharge? What does work-life integration look like for you? You got a busy gig, my friend. How do you keep that balance?
So I love cooking. Cooking keeps me grounded. It's a great pastime. I have a library of cookbooks. I am not one to cook out, to just improvise when cooking. I always have great cookbooks. I love my pressure cooker. I really love cooking. It helps me, get centered and really clear my mind. The other thing is I love my Peloton. I love biking. Someone I saw on Twitter recently called it moving meditation when you exercise. And it's so true. I mean, it's so helpful for, 1 hour a day, go exercise and think of nothing other than just exercise and feel better. The third thing I love to do is I do love to travel. And when I travel, I love to go and talk to people. I love to go to a local bar and talk to people that live there, find out how they live, how they're different, make relationships, make bonds with people that have had a totally different upbringing and background than me. It's to me, it's really, really fulfilling. But of course, Randy, and of course you'd asked this in my third week on the job, because it is challenging to have that work-life balance. I mean, when I look at my calendar, it's like it's never been this busy in my life. Like right now, I was trying to schedule a meeting with the CEO. Actually, we ended up scheduling it for today, but we had to go back and forth like 4 times between his calendar and my calendar. And that's why it's so important to find those things like that I mentioned earlier that help you keep grounded, help you clear your mind, and bring you that balance to your life.
I have to ask, did you join the credit union Peloton army during COVID, or did you have it pre-COVID?
I had it pre-COVID. So I've had it for two and a half years now.
Yeah.
And it was extremely handy to have it during COVID. But even outside of COVID, I actually love being able to just walk down the hall and hop on, first thing in the morning, last thing, and or in the afternoon when I get home. I love being able to do that without having to take the time to go and drive to the gym. So
that's fantastic. So it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience podcast without some rapid fire questions. So the questions are rapid, but your answers do not have to be. Is there something out there that you said no to that in hindsight, you're like, I'm sure glad I said no to that?
Randy, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And what I will tell you is I'm not going to say something that I said no to, but oftentimes when you get told no, you think that's the end of the world and that's going to be awful. But oftentimes I think the biggest blessings happen when you are told no. And you kind of revisit what you're doing and you look for a new opportunity, and and then when you have that different opportunity, you look back and you're like, boy, I am so happy that didn't work out.
That didn't work out that way. There are many of those, I can tell you. So it wasn't a Peloton. Is there that recent purchase that you made that you can't imagine life without? It doesn't have to be a big one that you didn't know you needed.
I needed a house, but I love the house that I just bought here in New Mexico. It's very New Mexican. I mean, and I am really glad I bought it. It reminds me why I love New Mexico. It's up in the mountains. And I'm just really glad to be back, and I'm really glad that we picked this particular home.
Oh, congratulations on the new home too.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a nice little house after being busy all day. It's nice to come home and enjoy the nature in New Mexico.
Oh, fantastic! What was Juan like in high school? Did you? And now that you're a league president, I mean, there's a very high bar on the next part of this question. Did you get in any memorable trouble that you're willing to share? And the reason I say that is, can you beat Diana's Grand Theft Auto? So,
no, this is going to probably shock the listeners that know me, but I was actually pretty shy in high school. So I was very, very shy. I didn't fit in. It was a period of time where I hadn't found my people. I hadn't found who I really was. I struggled with my identity, being Latino and assimilating in a culture that was different to mine. And that's why, I mean, if there's one thing that I hope listeners take away is mentorships are so important, because I met some really great role models that really helped me bring myself, my true self, to my personality, to my career, and helped me innovate and think outside the box. Because, when I was in high school, like, nobody probably would have wanted to talk to me. I was very, very shy and quiet.
Well, we're glad you did, that you had these mentors help you get to where you are today. So what are you reading? Is there a book that you recommend that maybe you're reading currently? Or, that other side of this question, is there a book that you just think everyone should read, maybe one that you've gifted to people over the years?
Well, this is going to be very topical. I'm reading The First 90 Days right now, and it is a great book. And it's a great book. That's right. Yep. It's a great book. I mean, I'm sure many people on this call have read it. It's actually a very good book for any new leaders and any people that are walking into a new job. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely. Yep. Jill and I both had copies of that. The random question: what is the greatest album of all time? That one you can listen to without skipping a song.
In the Heights.
In the Heights.
In the Heights. The movie just came out a week ago, and I love the movie. I love the album. The soundtrack, I think, is brilliant. I personally think it's Lin-Manuel Miranda's best work, personally. So inspiring. And for anyone who wants to better understand Latin culture and the kind of that journey that a lot of Latin leaders have, and credit unions and elsewhere, I highly recommend watching the movie and listening to the album.
It was Jill and her son Crosby and I all watched that last week and absolutely loved it. It's on, I think, HBO Max now or something like that. So it was fantastic. There was so much in that movie, like behind, like you couldn't just watch the front. Like there was stuff going on behind the scenes where you're like, wait, those people are dancing behind that tree also. I mean, it was just amazing. I loved it. So good call on that one. So there's a question that I don't send my guests in advance. Who is the first person that comes to mind when you hear the word success, and why?
The first person that comes to mind when I hear the word success is Lois Kitch. And I love Lois, and I think of her because she was also just a fantastic role model to me. I would argue that if you had talked to her when she was in high school, she would have never imagined that she would have been able to accomplish everything she's accomplished, that she would have been able to touch as many lives as she's been able to touch, that she's been able to improve so many lives and really help another generation of leaders. I worked with her when I was in New York because she was running Real Solutions nationally, and I brought Real Solutions to New York at the time. And every time I talk to her, every time I think of the things that she's done, I am just so inspired by her.
When she was on the podcast, it is by far my favorite location ever recorded. We were sitting on paint cans at the Don Bosco School in Kenya recording the podcast. I still, on my recorder, the plastic case, there's still paint, right? Like from it just sitting on the floor there. It reminds me every time. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. She inspires. But thank you again, my friend, for being on the show. The last question I have for you. Any final thoughts or asks of our listeners today?
Get involved, lean into to your league, lean into to CUNA, lean into great leaders in our movement, but get involved, think outside the box, innovate. I think credit unions are more relevant today than ever, but only if we seize the opportunities before us and we reach out.
Thank you again, Juan. We will link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. If people have more questions of you, what's your poison? You mentioned LinkedIn easier. Is that the easiest? Twitter, email?
Twitter, I'm Juan E. Fernandez. LinkedIn is a great way to reach me. Email jfernandez@cuanm.org.
We will link to all that. Have a great day, my friend, and be well.
You too.
Before we go, I would like to thank all of you for listening today. And once again, thank Juan for being on the show and sharing his life lessons learned over the course of his career with all of us. And then a big thank you to our sponsor, CUES. As I mentioned at the start of the show, make sure to subscribe to their podcast over on cumanagement.com. It's one of my favorites that I will tell you, I don't miss an episode. A couple more things before we go. Don't forget to subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast players: Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. We're everywhere. And then after you do, subscribe to the CUES podcast. And check out the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. You can Google that. It's on cuinsight.com. You can find the books mentioned on the show since episode 1. Fill out your summer reading list. Thank you all again for listening. Have a great day and be well, friends.